So if a man becomes terminally ill, there is a 2% chance that his wife will leave. If a woman becomes terminally ill, there is a 21% chance that the husband will leave. So men are 624% more likely to leave their wives if their wives become terminally ill. I was shocked to hear this, because how I see it growing up is that men, Asian men, just don't leave their sick wives. So my dad has his faults, you know, he bets on racehorses, he has a short temper, he always makes fun of my mom's thinking and shuts her off before she gets a chance to speak, and he always thinks he's right. If I was my mom, I would have left his ass already. But, you know, there are some good things about him. He never failed to put food on the table. He never beat his wife. He never beat my mom. And he has always loved her in his own dysfunctional way.
Basically means that men are approximately 624% more likely to separate from a woman if the woman gets sick.
So I got these statistics while watching The Diary of a CEO, and I was shocked because that has not been my experience at all, growing up in a traditional Asian family. Mind you, that I haven't seen this in any of my friends' families as well during high school and even elementary school, because I was in an elementary school where like 70% of the student population was Asian. And it got even deeper in high school. In high school, about 95% of the student body was Asian. So there are really only two scenarios that I can remember. Either the dad was home, cared for his wife, and they both worked together as a unit in order to survive, because like 95% of the popular student body in my high school were from immigrant parents, just like I was. And then the other scenario was that the student was in a single parent household. That means they were either being raised by just dad or being raised by just mom. So a couple weeks back, I was recommended this YouTube video by Aiden, and what he does is he goes and interviews interracial couples, and one of them was a Ukrainian woman. And what surprised me was that she was saying how in Ukrainian families, when you get sick, you actually go to the hospital alone. You deal with that stuff alone. And that she got married to a Chinese guy, and she was surprised, and it took some getting used to, that when she got sick, he actually went to the hospital, went to the clinic with her, sat there, waited for the doctor with her, went and talked to the doctor with her, picked up her description. So he was a lot more caring with her sickness, with her going to the hospital, than she was used to.
Guys more take care of girls. Like, for example, if you are sick, Chinese boyfriend, Chinese husband will much more take care of you. He will go to hospital with you, because in Ukraine, for example, usually no one go to hospital with you. You go alone.
And that was very surprising for her. And I was extremely surprised, because growing up, that is what we do. When a family member gets sick, we don't just say, hey, go to the hospital yourself and take care of it. We actually drive them to the hospital, to the doctors, to the clinic, wait for them with them. And if there's any news, we actually sit together and receive the news together. And I think that, you know, that's what you see when, you know, there's a pregnancy or something. But for Asian families, you know, for anything that is medical related or something important, we just go do it together. So I just want to ask you in the comments, what's your nationality, and what was going to the clinic like for you? Do you guys go together, or do you just go yourself? Because I'm not sure about other cultures, but for how I grew up, our family just took care of each other like that. So despite my dad's faults, he never failed at taking care of my mom when she got sick, of driving her to the clinic, picking up her prescriptions, making congee for her so she'd have something to eat. I remember back in high school, my mom actually got hit really bad with food poisoning, and then she got hit with the flu. So it was back-to-back pain, and she was like helpless. She was just stuck in bed for like 2 to 3 weeks. And I remember that my dad basically took care of everything. He did all the cleaning, the cooking, and feeding my mom and feeding Us, because we are terrible cooks. Luckily for him, right, my dad is an entrepreneur, so he can take off work whenever you want to, and that's exactly what he did during those 2 to 3 weeks. I remember him basically holding my mom's hand and guiding her into the car, driving her to the doctor to see what the heck was wrong with her, and then picking up prescriptions and cooking and feeding her congee. That's just what Asian men did. He would set alarms, making sure that my mom would take her medicine on time, and he would actually go and, sit next to her by the bedside and feed her congee because she was too weak to do that herself. And then when she couldn't put down the food, he'd hold up the trash can and watch her as she puked into the trash can. So I guess that's what you mean by in sickness and in health, huh? So sons are heavily valued in traditional Chinese culture, right? Because when a daughter marries out into a family, the custom is she adopts their last name. So it really is the sons that carries on the lineage. But for my mom, she never changed her last name. She always kept her last name as Chan, which is my grandfather's last name. So she never took on that custom. But I think that made her a little bit more distant from the family. I think that she might have felt that she never belonged to the family, because I always felt that, like most Chinese mothers, they usually are disgruntled with their daughter-in-laws. And that was the same way for my grandma until she got older and the spunk in her left, and she just kind of lost the will to have arguments with her daughter-in-laws. I think my brother and I being born was the connection that helped my mom become closer to the family, because we shared blood with her and we also shared blood with our family, which is the Lee family. My last name's Lee, right? So I always wonder, if my brother and I weren't born, would that mean that my mom would have always felt like a stranger with the Lee family? And I feel like this is something that is really only thought about or considered for Gen Xers or boomers, people that were more traditionals. I don't think it matters a lot for those of us that are millennials or Gen Zs or, Gen Alphas or babies right now. Anyway, what does this have anything to do with men divorcing their wives? Well, the thing is, I think that the conflict between my grandma and her daughter-in-laws mainly came from the fact of women love attention. I mean, why would women always wear push-up bras and yoga pants when they go to the gym? They want attention. I think the reason why my grandma always had such a pissy attitude with her daughter-in-laws is because once my dad and my uncle, once they marry, well, now the priorities change. They have a wife and they have kids. The priorities really are the kids and their wife and giving them the attention they need, because you're raising the next generation. But that is also hard to understand, because for grandma, she was always getting this attention from her sons, but now it's gone. That is a change that she would have to adjust for. And I think this is not just for my grandma, but it goes across the general culture of Chinese people. You always hear on social media how it's usually the mom and the daughter-in-law that has beef with one another, and this was the case. But dad and uncle really never stopped helping grandma when she needed it. When she needed to go to the hospital, get prescriptions picked up. Later in her years, actually, when my grandma was getting more forgetful, my parents would actually drive to her house every single night to make sure that she took her pills, took her prescriptions on time. So in Chinese families, we always take care of each other when the other is down. And Aiden's video really put things into perspective. I was thinking, all right, what if you had like a German grandma? What would you do if she had dementia or something? And I remember reading an article, hearing seniors in Germany, what happens is they just get put in a senior's home and they get taken advantage of and treated really poorly. That is just not the case for Asian families, or how I experienced my family growing up. As long as I remember, actually, my grandpa was a vegetable. I asked my cousin, have you ever remembered grandpa when he had his head straight? And he's like, no. So what happened is that I think the story goes that my grandpa had a stroke before I was born. So he always needed help, you know, changing diapers. He was in diapers and he lived in the hospital. And that was how I knew him, a vegetable. But still, grandma would walk from her house to the hospital to see him, to visit him, to make sure that he was taken care of, because she was always thinking that the hospital was feeding him poison because they weren't feeding him Chinese food. So she'd cook a meal, go over to the hospital, feed him, and then come back. And she did that every other day. So that's what I saw. And when you're raised in that culture where family just takes care of each other, that's what you become, right? So I think my parents saw that, the grandkids saw that. So when we get married out, or when we have a partner, when they're sick, we make sure that we're there with them, that they're taken care of. And as much as I would love to say, and I do say, that my family is dysfunctional, when it comes to taking care of each other, we get an A++ grade. So guys, just an FYI, I am terrible when it comes to storytelling. If you think my storytelling is good, it's because, first of all, I write a script and then I insert that script into Keep Views, which is an app that I developed, and it tells me which part of the script sucks, which part of the script is good, which part of the script needs more loving. And if you're a content creator on YouTube as well, and you're using scripts to tell your stories and you think it needs to be better, go check out keepviews.com, plug in your script, and see which parts of your script you can improve to make better videos. And that's at keepviews.com. She told me she had MS, and as she was telling me this, she was very apprehensive about it, and it felt like she struggled with that confession. And in my mind, I was thinking, why are you telling me this like it's such a big problem? It's no problem at all. I really like you, and if it comes down to it, I would take care of you. I met her back in my late 20s, and before you make any judgments, she was a really nice and amazing girl. It's just unfortunate that when I met her, I was pretty immature and she was way more mature than me, and the timing wasn't right. So she kicked me to the side and started dating this other guy that she met through volunteering. And when she did that, I hated her for the longest time. But after growing up, doing personal development, doing self-help, I couldn't be more appreciative for her for doing that. And I can honestly say that I do love her for making that decision, because it helped me grow up, it helped me become the man that I am today. Anyways, she had multiple sclerosis. So I remember that I used to ask her out a lot because I really liked her. You know, let's go out on a date. And every single time, or not every single time, most of the time she would respond with either I'm studying or I'm in a lot of pain right now from MS. I don't know if that was actually true or it was just an excuse because she didn't want to see me. Because let's face it, I was very, very needy. Now, aside from her, back then I also had this other friend who also had multiple sclerosis, and both of them basically lived lives with very compromised immune systems. But for my friend with MS, that never stopped her from doing things. But what is common between the both of them is whenever you ask if they need help or they need someone to be there with them when they go do their checkups, they would always respond, no, I'm okay, I can do it by myself. So both of them were raised like my mom. They were both raised by a neglectful father. So whenever I offered to help them, they would be very independent and they would decline. And from what it sounded like, I never got the full story, but it sounded like when they actually got the news that they had MS, they actually didn't have anyone there to help share the pain of that news with them. They were there alone. So when they go get checkups or go see the doctor and go get prescriptions or things like that, they would always do that alone. So for them, one was Muslim, the other one was white. And I don't know if it is a racial thing, but that was what was common between the both of them. They both had to face this really scary situation alone. So my friends here at the apartment that I'm living in host events for the apartment, and they gave me this because they didn't finish the donuts, so I'm gonna get fat. But anyways, the video that said that 624% of men are more likely to cheat or leave their terminally ill wives, that shocked me. You know, it's just so different. Even my high school friends, some of which were Chinese, Filipino, Vietnamese, when someone, friend or family have a situation or needed help, we'd be there. I can't ever imagine like having a girlfriend or a wife and they have some sort of health trouble and they're going to the hospital, but you let them go to the hospital alone. It just doesn't compute. Just imagine you have a diagnosis for multiple sclerosis, MS, and when you're there sitting in front of the doctor's office and he's reading such a life-changing illness in front of you and you're alone, it's a lot of burden to bear. But when you have someone there, you don't have to do it alone. You don't have to take that burden alone. You can share that burden with that someone else that's there with you. So that's why I think that the statistic that 21% of men are more likely to divorce their wives that are terminally ill, I don't think that came from a full sample size, because from my 33 years of growing up in an Asian household, I came to believe that Asian men just don't leave their sick wives. That statistic does not apply across all men. And if you enjoyed this video about Asian men and our culture, then you might enjoy this video right here.